Okay, you badge wearing donut eaters. If we don't have any technical difficulties, this will go as smooth as a standard traffic stop. This was Real American Blue, the law enforcement podcast where we interrogate our guests. No Miranda rights are read. Today we're going to have as a guest Troy Hillman. He is the author of a book, Chasing Down the Zombie Killer. Um, some of you may be familiar with that case, and some may not be, but we're going to let Troy introduce himself and take it away. Troy?
Yeah, hi, Rich. Thank you for having me on. I was a detective for about 10 years in cold case homicide. I was actually a sergeant, so I was over the team. I had the opportunity to kind of we had a kind of a mission impossible. We had over 2,500 cold cases. But two that stuck out were the canal murders, which happened in the early 90s, 1992 and 1993.
And that arrest just came to fruition around 2023. Is that correct on that individual?
Well, actually, the arrest came down in 2015, but it took so many years to actually. That's when he was sentenced to death
Oh, the
row.
prosecution. Okay. Okay. I had my numbers mixed up there. I knew it was a long, drug out case, and I actually remember that. I just recently retired, but I've been in public safety for the last 45 years.
Wow.
Um, and I do recall that case at the beginning of my career with the law enforcement when that came out and that occurred. So, can you tell us a little bit about it? Or actually, let's start with your background first. If you're able to get into certain things, that would be awesome to lead people up to what got you to that case.
Yeah. So I had really no idea. I was from a small town in Illinois, kind of the central part, and I had no idea. I hadn't really thought about what I wanted to do with my life. But I had been indoctrinated by tons and tons of. My dad loved Clint Eastwood, and so I saw a lot of Dirty Harry, Bronson, NYPD Blue, Hill Street Blues, all those. So that was kind of the cornerstone, and so I always kind of had this fascination with law enforcement, detective work, police work. So I go to the University of Illinois, and I start in pre med, and I realized quickly that chemistry is not something that I understand or can do functionally for the next years and then perform as a doctor. So back out of that, and I end up kind of floundering. And then my uncle was a CPA there in Decatur, Illinois, where I was from. And my dad was big from Caterpillar Tractor Company. And he's like, "Hey, Troy, get a degree in business and specifically accounting, and you can do anything." Um,
Wow.
so I kind of went down that path, and it was kind of a blessing and a curse. I was really good at accounting, and scored really high on the CPA exam, but it wasn't something that I enjoyed, and just considered it as a 24-year-old very tedious and boring, and I felt kind of strapped to a cubicle. So that's when I escaped, so to speak. That's a great career for a lot of people. You can make really good money, and it's very stable, but it just wasn't for me. So I kind of turned my back on it in 97. I think everybody thought I was crazy. My parents thought I was crazy, my family, friends, for joining the Phoenix Police Department. Not because it was a bad department, but because it was over 2,000 miles away. Nobody had ventured from my family out that far west. And I was kind of leaving everything I knew, taking a huge pay cut. And the next thing I would know, I was in the Arizona Law Enforcement Academy down to where you were, down on 7th and way
Yeah.
below Dobbins. So, but it was a phenomenal, it was the best thing I ever did. And kind of got to work with a lot of great people during my career. Started in South Mountain Precinct, and kind of cut my teeth on police work. Then, for whatever reason, I ended up as a financial crimes investigator, which kind of parlayed with my background. And then I realized that somebody kind of talked me into taking the sergeant's test, and so I just I did it, and I don't really do things half-assed, so to speak. So I ended up scoring high, and the next thing I know, I'm 30 years old, and I'm a sergeant, and I'm supervising,
Well,
12 people, and I'm really not mature. And so that was a tough transition to become a sergeant. And then I had the opportunity to work in the Violent Crimes Bureau as an admin sergeant, which kind of fit with my background of managing budgets and helping the commander do various projects. But I got to know the homicide lieutenant, and it was a guy by the name of Joe Knott. And Joe Knott was he was an IT guy, had done a lot of things in the department, very smart. And I always joke, he got visibly excited by Excel spreadsheets, kind of like I did as a former accountant. So he ended up saying kind of, hey, Troy, come over in 2008 and, test for the homicide, the cold case position, and come over and help me get organized with your background as a CPA.
What academy class were you in, if I can ask?
I was in 308 with Lisa Rushak. It was my sergeant.
Okay, yeah, you were about 14 before me, 10 before me, something like that. Yeah,
okay.
I was in 234.
Oh wow, okay.
Oh no, hold it, no, I was after you. I'm sorry, my number's backwards. Yeah, I was in 234.
234. Okay.
Yeah.
So you would have been, yeah.
I was before you.
Okay, yeah, because I came on in 97, so you would have been early 90s, or?
Yeah, I was 90.
Okay.
Actually, yeah. Wow. Okay. And what year did you promote?
2003, and I went to work. Yeah, I went to work Mountain View Precinct, and I think a lot of my skills from South Mountain helped me do scene work and that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, busy area down there.
Yeah, but the personnel issues were kind of difficult. We had the 71 area at the time, so there were a host of personnel issues that I had to deal with, and just people not getting along on the squad and that kind of thing.
Awesome. So you retired with Phoenix as a sergeant, is that correct?
Yeah, I decided not to promote to lieutenant just because cold case became my my baby, so to speak. I spent over 10 years in cold case. And I really enjoyed it, and enjoyed, just getting in, digging in those older cases and trying to move them forward.
How did this case fall into you? You probably worked many visible cases, I'm sure, but how did this one fall into your lap?
And so Mike Meislish was the scene agent on these two cases, and he was retiring. So I ended up going to the cold case squad. I didn't know a lot about the cases in particular, other than they were horrific and never been solved.
Yeah.
We got a media records request in 2011. It was the fall. And I remember I kind of got barked at by the commander secretary because I burned through a ton of toner, a ton of paper, reams and reams of paper printing this thing out off of PACE. And PACE was that computer, or basically records management system at the time, which you're familiar with. And so I poured through this, and part of my job as a sergeant was to redact these cases, or I considered part of mine, so that the detectives could actually work cases and keep going. And I would kind of take that on because we've had a lot of situations where we didn't redact an open case. It would get in the hands of say, a prisoner, and they would want to, work their charges off, whatnot. And so we'd send a detective all over the place and, to different facilities, and then only to find out that they had gotten a hold of an unredacted copy of a report. So I took it seriously. So I started burning through the Canal murders, and I think it was about 2 weeks it took me to get completely through them. And I was kind of horrified that what this guy had done to these young ladies and got away with, and that kind of asking around, the prevailing opinion was this guy's dead. Don't waste your time. He's been in the DNA system, since the late 90s, early 2000, and he's never hit. And so that's 2011. And so there's this kind of mentality of move on. You've got other things to do, and which we did. We had 2,499 other cases to look at.
So one of these murders occurred in 1992, and the other was in 1993, almost a year apart.
Yeah, and I could get into the kind of the details or the overview if you want.
Sure.
Okay. So in November of 1992, Angela Barrasso, who is turning 22 the next day, 22 years old, she had hailed from a small town in Pennsylvania, went to New Jersey, DeVry, and then finished up her studies in LA at the DeVry. She moved over to Phoenix summer of 92, and with her boyfriend at the time it was the Woodstone apartment complex at I-17 and Cactus. She loved to go for bike rides of an evening. And so November '92, she decides to go for a bike ride, and normally her boyfriend Joe would go with her. For this night, he was baking her a cake, so he was putting all that together. He doesn't go with her, and then she never comes back. Fast forward to the next day, and she's found very close to her apartment, up along the bike trail. She'd been dragged up on a berm, was naked except for shoes and socks, and was almost cut in half. And then she was beheaded, and the head was not at the scene, and her bike was missing, her Walkman, and it was just a horrific scene for those officers who had to discover her, for her, just everything. It was very, very tragic. So that was our first canal murder in 1992.
Wow. And then that individual, I hate to mention his name, and I'm not going to unless we absolutely have to, but for a year he just spent his time on the Phoenix streets, but almost in a high profile type of a lifestyle. He was always out at events. Is that correct, or things?
Well, that actually was years later.
Years later? Okay.
Yeah, at this point, he, from what we know, was very. He was kind of nerdy. He wore glasses, very thin. Did bike riding, did some security work down for St. Vincent de Paul. But that's basically where he was at the time.
Got it. Okay, I had some of my information mixed up there, but
Yeah. These cases are massive, and
I could only imagine.
yeah, it's hard to keep all the details, and I just lived it for so many years that. But yeah, it's again, I always tell people don't be upset because it's just they're massive cases.
Yeah, and then it was almost a year later. Melanie, her last name Burmess.
Ernest, yeah.
Um,
So Melanie, in September of '93, she is a 17-year-old. She goes to Arcadia High School on the east side of town. She lives near 40th Street Indian School. Beautiful young girl, like Angela was, had her whole future ahead of her. She decides to go for a bike ride after dusk and ends up riding towards Metro Center. And then the next day she went missing, and the next day she was found floating in the canal. And it was our Phoenix dive team that brought her out. And it was, I guess, just a different, fantasy for the killer. It was very obvious that it was probably the same killer. But he had carved on her and carved initials into her and a cross and redressed her. And it was just kind of a right turn from what he did to our first victim, Angela, in '92.
wow. And then, to the best of everyone's knowledge, he's not involved in any other cases, or was he?
Well, I think he was involved in the Brandy Myers case, which happened right before in the summer of '92. We didn't link those together till years later. And who knows what else he did. He went kind of dormant, which is one of the bizarre things that we looked at. Is you don't start off doing this horrific murder in 1992, taking a head for 10 days, throwing the head back in the canal, and then the second murder where he redresses her. Obviously, he's getting more bold, more brazen. So where did he go? So we were kind of left, and I think the original investigators, who I have to say did a hell of a good job. And I always plug them, because if it weren't for the original homicide investigators and the team collectively, the lab, everybody, if they had not done their job, we've got nothing from a cold case perspective. So we kind of kudos to them, and they don't get as much, obviously, credit. It's usually the cold case team that gets the credit, but they deserve it, because this was difficult to manage all the incoming information from around the country. In fact, around the world, information pouring in and trying to archive it and keep it there. That was a monumental task.
It's definitely that initial approach to a crime scene, and all the capturing of interviews and getting the small details down, and then of course with the crime technicians, that capturing of evidence, every little piece that's out there, because for those cases that do go cold, it could be a year, 10, 20 years later that small piece of evidence captured opens up the whole case.
Absolutely. It's even how they packaged
Yep.
things back in the day. They almost knew, it was almost like they knew that DNA would be a thing, even though in the 80s and 70s they didn't really think about that. But they did a lot of, I guess what I've come to learn is ABO typing, cross typing, and that kind of thing. But it's just they didn't know how powerful DNA would become.
Yeah, the detective side of the police work through my career leaps and bounds from what started out to where it ended, and even where they're going now with the crime technicians and the trainings and just the technology that's out there available to these folks to collect evidence. It's just absolutely amazing, and the differences it's going to make in the upcoming days for solving again cold cases that are out there. But there's such a backlog. We can start today. There's still going to be plenty of work to do for cold cases for the tomorrows.
Yeah, and when we work the 2,500 cases that we kind of we couldn't just put those on the shelf and say we're going to do nothing but work the canal murders. So we were working them. We were going to court. We were talking to family members on those cases, trying to move them forward, reviewing them. So those were important too. But this kind of became an obsession, especially of mine, because I always say a sergeant's role. If you've got good people, they kind of go out and do their thing. It's kind of, I was a sergeant a long time. It was kind of a somewhat of a boring job. So I had the opportunity though of being able to walk in the shoes of my detectives and help them. So I jumped into this canal murders because I think all of us wanted as a team, obviously to get this guy, even though again, the prevailing opinion was he's dead.
Wow. So in your travels through this particular homicide investigation, at what point, or was it after you retired, that you decided, hey, I want to put this down in on paper and get it out there for the public?
So we went on a 3.5 year journey. I call it a roller coaster ride with a lot of ups and downs on this particular case. And it started in 2011. We made the arrest in 2015. I think that to me was just being able to solve that case and identify the perpetrator was phenomenal. And it showed the main takeaways were you can never give up. You can't give up on these families. You can't give up on and write it off that he's dead, because he could still be out there and he could still be active, especially this type of serial killer investigation. Also use technology. I mean, you alluded to it. There's massive things, and we were the first to use forensic investigative genetic genealogy. And the Phoenix Police Department doesn't take a lot of credit for it, but we used it in 2014 on a major serial killer investigation, and we kind of set the stage for the Golden State Killer investigators to use it in 2018. So we were kind of pioneers there. Which I'm very proud of for the department and for my team. But I guess why the story and why I decided to write the book, a couple of years after we solved it, we won national awards. We were kind of on cloud nine. Everything was going great. We were solving 12 to 15 cold cases a year dating back to the 70s. Very proud of what we were doing. And we kind of had a very good recipe for solving cold cases. And then I got a call from, I'll never forget it. I got a late start as a father, but I was holding my second daughter, and she's 6 months old, and she's younger than that. She's colicky, and my wife had stepped out, and I got a call from a commander who's retiring in 2 weeks, who said, "Hey, Troy, you're going back to patrol. We're functioning. We're disbanding the cold case squad." And I was like, "What?" It was effectively one of the worst days of my life. I kind of decided I have to tell the world about this story. About we just buried our heads in the sand and said, "Hey, this killer's dead," then Angela and Melanie and their families would never have justice, and a lot of people would never have justice. So I feel so strongly about the need for cold case teams, and not only just throwing bodies at it, so to speak, putting the most passionate, hardworking, bulldog type detectives towards it, and just getting out of their way and letting them work. So that's kind of in a nutshell the reason I wrote the book.
Wow. You wrote only one book on this case, or were there two books, or you authored another book, I believe. Is that correct?
Just
For some-
just one book.
On this case? Okay.
Yeah, this was, and it was tough to get it because again, we alluded to these cases are massive. So to try to put it, but I also wanted I know I didn't want a massive book to be 500 pages and I know there's a sweet spot in the publishing industry. A lot of people told me, hey, just self-publish. It's a lot easier. And I was kind of resisted that because I said, I want to get this out. I want a traditional publisher. I want to get it out to a bigger market. And not that there's anything wrong with self-publishing, but I always say I kind of wanted to swing for the fences, to use a baseball analogy, and get it out there. And I was lucky. It took me a long time to get an agent, a literary agent, and then a publisher. Took her a year and a half to get a publisher, but landed Pegasus Crime. They're phenomenal. They're out of New York, part of Simon & Schuster, and they helped me. They helped me tell the story.
Wow. What? Where would you say the book is out, or where would you say it's out there? Pretty good numbers are out there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people like true crime, and they enjoy reading about it. I really hope that people take the message away that this is important work. Again, we need to make sure we hold our leaders accountable and make sure that they are working these cases, because it's so easy just to say, oh, let's do other things and not concentrate on these homicides, these missing persons, these sexual assaults, these things that don't just go away.
No, they're just as important as the current things happening, because probably half of the suspects are doing the current crimes that are involved in cold cases. They don't really retire. They continue going until they're caught.
Yeah, if they've gotten away with one, what's to stop them from trying, doing it again? And we would track a lot of guys down, our suspects. They would be in prison for something else. So and some of them wouldn't. Some are, like our guy on this canal, a huge case, was alive and well in the city of Phoenix, raising a daughter. And that's, you alluded to, his persona was this. He was hiding in plain sight. He really had this zombie hunter. He drove. He had bought at auction a black and white police car, and then he tricked it out and made it look. And he basically emblazoned the zombie hunter on the back. He had a mannequin that was bloody in the back seat, and he went to all these Comic-Con events and steampunk. And he kind of. I feel bad for those people, because there's a lot of great people in those that do that for fun and camaraderie. And then he kind of mocked them and basically was this serial killer hiding amongst them.
You never know who your neighbor is.
Right.
And that individual probably walks amongst, I'm sure, got out there and introduced himself to officers that were out on the streets, and no one had an idea who he was.
Yeah, there were two officers in particular that took a photo with him, and I feel like the media has kind of dragged them through the mud. So in all my presentations on this, I always put smiley faces, because the officers didn't know. I mean, they had no idea. Yeah, they had no clue. They were just working this event. Here's this local legend, kind of this local figure named the Zombie Hunter, and so they were taking a picture. But if you look closely at his face, he's got a smug look on his face of, I think I'm going to get away with all this. I'm smarter than all of you guys, but turns out he wasn't. So
yeah, I've done something, and you don't know what I did, and I'm going to get a photo op with you.
Yeah.
This individual, he's in prison still.
Yeah, he's on death row, and that was the main goal, was that he would never see the light of day, and be able to walk amongst the public. So. Very excellent job by the county attorney's office in getting him prosecuted. There were a lot of people sometimes say, "Oh, this," give either me credit or maybe one of my detectives, Clark, credit, because we've been in some of the media. But it was a team effort, all from my squad down to all the original investigators, like I alluded to in the past. Everybody had a hand at these cases. It was massive.
Wow. Um, do you still have any contact with the families of these individuals?
I do. The second victim, Melanie, her sisters and her mother. I told them I was writing this book. I wanted to make sure they knew
Yeah,
about it. Yeah, and that basically it was to that Melanie and Angela gave me a bigger voice to champion kind of what I
awesome.
become my slogan of cold cases matter,
Yeah,
and they were pretty, I think, happy with that. Obviously, they've been through hell,
yeah,
not only waiting on justice, the arrest, but then the trial, and then just maybe trying to put it behind them. But they also said, even in court, they wanted something good to come of this, and I'm trying to help. Some good come of it by having fully staffed cold case squads, like we talked about.
almost 30 over just over what 30 years from the murders to incarceration, and like you said, the hell they've gone through. I'm sure there was a lull in the action, so to speak, in the middle years, but then this arrest comes and everything is starts all over again for them. I mean, to front line, so to speak.
Yeah, and then they had to wait and wait for years, about 8 years, to go for it to go to trial. And there was a lot of, given it's a death penalty case, capital, but there was a lot of maneuvering by the defense, and it was just hard to watch. And given there was COVID happened during that, so that slowed the court
Yeah.
process. But yeah, it was hard to stomach for investigators, let alone the family. They had to sit through all of it. So.
Were all the officers involved with this case at the time that it went to trial? Were any retired, or were everyone still in the force?
Yeah, so the original investigators were Russ Davis was the original investigator, and he did a hell of a good job. He was retired, and Mike Meischlich was retired. He's the scene agent, did a very good job on the scene. And there were some other patrol officers. There was the dive team that had a hand at basically working the canals, trying to figure out who did it. They beat those canals up and the bike paths during the aftermath of both murders.
Did any come back for the trial to participate within being questioned, or
Yeah, I can't remember his first name, but it was Peltier. Was got an excellent statement. Miller, as a juvenile, had basically our perpetrator had stabbed a woman in the back up near Paradise Valley Mall, and he had got a kind of a quasi confession from him about that. Did a great job, and Mike Meischlich testified, and a couple of my detectives from the cold case perspective.
that's awesome. Well, everyone, like you said, came together, took massive amounts of people with a lot of legwork to put this case together and get it to trial.
Yeah, yeah, and another good thing is Phoenix PD thought better of not having a true cold case squad. And then 2021, I got a knock on my door. I was back in financial crimes as a sergeant, and they said, "Hey, Troy, we made a mistake. Would you come back to cold case and fix it?" And so that was kind of music to my ears. I got back in the saddle. I started working, but then they wanted to start sending us back to patrol again, and I just kind of had enough. Young family, and so I retired and felt like I could help more from the outside, be a consultant and kind of an advocate for cold cases. So now I work with parents of murdered children at the national level. I'm one of their volunteers. I'm on the Silent Witness Board. So I've really tried to kind of give back.
Uh, I think we lost you there for just a moment. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, we got some technical difficulties. I think you froze a little bit on the screen. You might have popped back in, but we can continue on chatting until your video comes up. Reference the book, the second book that you authored. What was that in reference to? Cold case type stuff, or was it something different?
Well, I haven't written per se under my name another book. I'm working on a cold case manual for kind of how to train other agencies how to set up a cold case squad, how to work cases, review them, that kind of thing. And I am kind of dabbled a little bit. I've started on a fiction book, kind of with some characters from my past. But this is the main book. Yeah, the Chasing Down the Zombie Hunter is
Awesome.
my main thing I focused on.
With the jumping ahead in thoughts, with the problems with law enforcement in hiring nowadays compared to the past, do you think there's still an emphasis on cold case? Have you talked to any departments, specifically the one you retired from, or do you know where that's at nowadays?
Yeah, I stay in touch with one of my detectives that worked on the canal murders is still there, still working
Great.
hard. They've hired some civilian investigators to come in and help. So it's definitely a focus. But now I think it's grown just in that department to over 3,000 cases.
Wow.
So if you do the math, you have 5 detectives. That's 600 cases a piece. So that's just massive to try to manage that. And I don't know if the missing persons section has. If I believe they're still working those in combination with sexual assaults. But we are pretty tight with them and making sure that we're working cases. So yeah, I'm hoping that they still have a focus on it and keep that focus. But I don't know. I fear that, if there's some leaders that get in a position and don't see the value, they don't see, because cold cases has got that twists and turns, because you can work on a cold case for a couple of years and really per se have nothing to show. You don't have a bad guy or an arrest, but you've moved the case forward, if that makes sense. It's been worked. It's been worked a couple times. You pick it up as a cold case detective and then work on it more, but there's no guarantee that you'll solve it.
Well, yeah, I'm sure that being in a command type position, a leadership, they've got to decide, where they focus with their manpower, what they need to work with nowadays, because again, there's such a shortage of officers in comparison to probably back in early 2000s, that it's tough to deal with a lot of these cases.
I agree, but I always say that I think law enforcement has suffered kind of an identity crisis, being that they try to do too much, trying to help all the homeless problems, trying to help all the drug addicts, trying to help all kids in schools, when we really need to kind of peel back and focus on, okay, what's the number one thing we investigate? Well, that would be murder. What's the number 2? Well, that's probably sexual assault. We get into missing persons. We get into robbery. We get into and to me, those you should staff heavily in those areas. I get it. You need officers out on the streets, but maybe there's some more efficient ways we can free them up to be more out there. But you have to fund the homicide detectives. There's some of the other ones, and I hope people take this. I get it. There needs to be community relations, but there was a whole bureau. In fact, that's where I went after I was kind of removed from cold case. I went to the community relations bureau. And again, a lot of good people doing great things, but to me, murders ranked a little higher in our priority list than, trying to, figure out what this group was doing or what that group. So.
Yeah, it's tough again, being, I couldn't imagine being up top there and trying to make decisions where I focus my manpower, because you're trying to get people to accept law enforcement. So you're trying to go down the community relations avenue and get that cushy stuff going on, but yet you have these cases on the other side, homicides, missing persons, sexual assaults, that demand a lot of attention and a lot of manpower and a lot of hours. And it's torn between two things, and one usually suffers for sure.
Yeah, and I always use this story. I remember I had a view of Adams Street from my office, and I was looking at it, and here I would see this homicide detective who had been out on a scene for 48, 72 hours, no sleep, hadn't seen his family or him or her, and then walking towards from a parking garage that was probably 3 or 4 blocks in the summer heat. And then I would see this community relations detective pull in the back of our headquarters, fresh, had a good night of sleep at a Starbucks, and I not to pick on them, but I'm like, where are our priorities? To me, that homicide detective Should we make them park 3 blocks away where they've been out all night and they're tired as hell, or should we somehow figure out a way to make their lives better? Because to me, again, murder ranks one as far as what we're trying to do. And again, you go down missing persons, you go down the list, sexual assaults, those kind of things are very important.
Yeah, there's a lot of tough decisions that need to be made by commanders and the top administration for sure in this business, and they're not always the best decisions made, you know. So something always suffers for sure.
Yeah,
But everything really deserves attention. It's just hard to give it, and nowadays, again, with the lack of manpower, it's harder and harder to take care of all the business that one needs to take care of.
agreed. But as a CPA sitting in there, I saw some of to me, the waste, some of the things. I think there needs to be, just my opinion, kind of an overhaul of how we do business, because we've been doing the same thing since the 1960s. And it's like, okay, can we do this more efficient? Can we be more nimble here? Can we and run it more like a business of a sort? I get it; it's not a business, but to me, there needs to be change. You know, even in terms of the patrol officers spending a lot of their time writing, is there a way to take that off their plate and make, use AI or use something else to make them more efficient, to keep them on the street, because that's where we need them.
No, I agree with you. The changes definitely need to be there. You know, there are, as I'm sure you're aware in your agency, there's probably positions that easily can be filled by civilians, but we have so much pride, we don't want to give up our, we'll say the domain that we've got under that badge. We don't want to give it up, but there are a lot of positions that can be dealt with community relations. You can probably staff that with a majority, if not all, civilians. Yeah, you need to have knowledge of the job that you're out there promoting, i.e., the police officers and so forth. But I think you put them through small academies. But there's a lot of positions that can be covered by civilian, and free those sworn people up and get them out either on the streets or into detective positions, into cold case positions. And of course, again, we still have to up the staffing nowadays currently, because I think every agency suffers with low manpower numbers.
Yeah, it's a travesty that Phoenix PD didn't hire for, say, 7 years. And that was probably one of the biggest missteps that they made. But it is what it is, and you have to deal with it, and that's why there's people at the command staff level that are trying to figure that out, and city managers and that kind of thing.
You know, it seems whether it's government or private sector, the security or the law enforcement portion of a business, we'll call it, always seems to be last tended to. In private sector, they say, we haven't had much shoplifting here. Everything's been going well. Well, that's because your store detectives are doing their job, and or the other things you're doing within. Same with the government side. We'll say with policing in the city. Crime's down, but you still need to hire, because you're going to have that turnover. Continuous, and you can't not hire officers. You always got to plan for retirements, the injuries that might occur on the job, and other things, but you got to keep hiring so the wheel keeps turning. And as you said, it's a shame that I don't think Phoenix is the only agency that was in that pickle, but I think others did the same thing, not hiring for a period of time. And then what has come about here in the immediate future or time, hard to get officers hired because of what has occurred the last 5 years within the cities across the nation. Now we're all severely hurting.
Yeah, it's a shame when they went to ramp up hiring that the whole defund the police kind of movement started. Hopefully the pendulum swinging back and people realize that the police are not the enemy.
No, we're not.
That we're just trying to help, and we're human beings just trying to figure it out. And I always told people, I said, for the most part, I worked with some phenomenal human beings.
Yeah.
that were, getting shot at, seeing gruesome images day in, day out. And there were a couple bad apples across the nation who
Everywhere.
bad shoots or have been racist or something. And that doesn't excuse them, but you can't. There's bad people in every single profession, and you need to weed them out, and then really reward the people doing the good work.
Yeah, I call it the human factor. Yeah, it doesn't matter the age, gender, their financial status. Things are going to go amiss with somebody in those groups. It doesn't matter. But in law enforcement, they do the best they can, putting people through testing, and like you just said, try to weed out those that just don't belong there. And every now and then, again, someone slips through because they were able to outdo the system, but it usually catches up with them somewhere within their career.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, because I've seen some that I know when I went through my testing process, I was scared to death, and have seen people make it through, and their true personality comes out within the first year or two or three of their career, and they're not there any longer. But how they made it through, I don't know, because I know I gave my all, and I was wiped by the time I was done with the testing process. So,
Yeah.
but they just go through and go on,
Yeah, you get through the academy, and I'm hearing I'm not going to say easier, but it's been softened maybe a little bit. And I think the academy that we went through was pretty tough. I mean, I wouldn't compare it to military, basic or anything, but it was
tough.
Yeah, I had a tough time, and then but I really met a lot of lifelong friends there, and and then you go to field training, and that to me was even tougher. Because depending on who your field training officer is, you're going to have a lot of challenges, and this is a proving ground, and the stakes are high. You don't want to screw up out there on the street because you could get yourself killed or get your partner killed or anything like that. So it's there are so many checks and balances to try to weed those people out, and you're right, they usually weed themselves out within the first 5 years.
Yeah, I did field training for just about 20 years.
Wow.
I took great pride in it. And a lot of the people, not that it was anything that I did, but a lot of the people that I was their primary went on to climb the ladder, positions of chiefs with departments. So I'm pretty proud of that. Again, not only what I did, but because you have 3 field training officers at the time in the programs we had back then. But they moved up the ladder, sergeants, lieutenants, captains, chiefs. So it's nice to see that. I myself chose not to promote. I left my footprint by staying down in the mud in the trenches and doing the things I did best for my career. So
yeah, and that's very rewarding to. Again, there were some times I wondered why I promoted to sergeant, just because it was just trying to balance all the personnel issues. It's not something that I particularly enjoyed it. I just wanted to get do work, and I just wanted to move things forward and that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, everybody has their own path, and that's the beauty of it. There's so many, especially a large department like Phoenix, you can move around and you can do a host of various things or kind of whatever you want to do. So it's pretty. It's still a great career. I think there's a lot of openings for people. Should look at it as a very stable career. Obviously, it's dangerous, but there's a lot of. To me, there's a lot of good things that could come out of that career.
This local area you mentioned, Phoenix. You have great weather, great access to a lot of beautiful things within the state, within the city, and you have a good career here. It's a good department to work for. That and the other local surrounding agencies, Sheriff's Office, Maricopa County, Chandler, Phoenix, Gilbert Police, a lot of good agencies within the immediate area here to work for.
Yeah, I always joke that if I had known about Mesa's healthcare retiree program, that I may have stood in their line, but I didn't know about it. All I had, my sights were focused on Phoenix PD, but both great agencies. But I do think that's a nice perk, is to have in retirement not have to worry too much about healthcare.
Yeah, there's some other agencies that are jumping into doing that. if I'm correct, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but I believe Goodyear PD on the west side of town is doing something of that, and I think there's also another agency. But yeah, that's a nice thing to get at the end of your career, not have to use your retirement funds to fund your health care after you did a 20, 30-year career of giving yourself to the public.
Yeah.
So, for sure. Well, hopefully your journey of being an author is going to help you. Not that you're doing it specifically or doing it really for that at all. Your passion was to get the information out on the cold cases you worked, but hopefully that'll help you, for your retirement career.
Yeah, I hope people want to read this book. It's available in audio. It's available in pretty much everywhere: Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Simon and Schuster, pretty Target, Walmart. So I hope people read it. The second thing I'm kind of requesting is if you like it, please review it because that helps me as a first time author. I know I'm not James Patterson. I know I'm not one of these celebrities that's writing a book, but I think it's an important message that comes through this book. So support me by rating it, reviewing it.
Absolutely.
That helps, I guess, with the algorithms and that kind of thing.
With this high-profile case dealing with the book, have you been approached, or has there been any talk, or is there any talk about maybe a movie?
I would love a movie. And people have said that this thing belongs in Hollywood. But there are talks of maybe a possible series that maybe something hopefully maybe on a streaming agency or streaming device like Hulu or Netflix or HBO or one of those.
Yeah, it's definitely a case, unfortunately, that those that are into the crime novels and so forth, I'm sure would be very captivating. A, to read the book, and B, to watch a series or a movie on the circumstances of this particular case. I just can't imagine. Horrific. Yeah, you'd be on the edge of your seat if it was definitely put it on the big screen.
Well, I always tell people my goal with the book was to almost put you riding shotgun with us, walking through the cold case investigation, almost as if you're just on a ride along. You're just sitting there and you're watching. So hopefully I've had some good feedback that people say, yeah, that's what I got. So that was my goal, was to put people front and center with us as we walk through the investigation.
Yeah. And that's a great thought, putting someone side by side with you walking through it. That's how they should feel when they read the book, like they're there working with you. Yeah. You can only imagine. Well, we're getting toward the end. We still have a couple minutes left, but I definitely want to thank you very much for coming on and enlightening the viewers about the case. And I hope some get interested in what we've said and maybe pick up that book and then review that for you and maybe give you some other information that you can use for the future down the road.
Yeah, there's a lot of information on my website. I have an author website, troyhillmancoldcase.com, about how you can help advocate for cold case squads, cold case teams, for missing persons, for homicides, for sexual assaults. It is important, and I guess I sound maybe like a broken record, but I believe that there need to be heavily staffed and worked.
A couple pointers before we step off. What would you give to the current detective, be it in cold case or not in cold case? What would be some handful of tips you would give them?
I would say, treat the case as if it were your family member, because unfortunately, there were some really good detectives that I read the reports. But if other ones seem to have been burnout or strove for mediocrity, and we're talking about such a gravity of a case like a homicide, a missing person. And then also don't be afraid to team up. There tends to be a little bit of a lone wolf philosophy after that initial call out, to so to speak, on the case, because I think great things happen with teamwork because there's people that say, hey, you didn't see this. What'd you think about this? There's brainstorming, there's collaboration. That's important. Don't be afraid to really build a strong relationship with the lab, especially the DNA section, because they are so vital to cold cases in particular, and homicides for that matter, regular homicides that haven't made their way to cold case. And then also look at technology. Don't, like we did. We looked at a genealogist. Nobody had heard of a genealogist back in 2014, but we took a chance on it. We went back to the VDOC Society in Philadelphia. That's in the book, where we talked to a group of experts because we knew we were outmatched. We were dealing with a serial killer, and we needed help. They didn't teach this stuff in Homicide 101. So don't be afraid to think outside the box. So those are the kind of messages that I would tell them.
I know, you mentioned the DNA. I was a couple of years into my career, probably about maybe 8, 10, and I'm on this burglary scene, and my crime scene tech picks his little bag up in a brush, and he's sweeping some glass shards from the window into it. And I'm like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm collecting some evidence." I said, what are you going to do with? You just had a few shards of glass. It was the safety glass that broke up, and you just collected a few pieces of it. I said, "What are you going to do with that?" He goes, "Well, if you come upon someone," and he gave me a scenario. You go to a house for maybe a DV type call, and you're leaving, and you see shoes by the front door, and you see glass in there. If we can match up the glass, he says, glass has its own DNA. We can say it came from this window at this store just by, if say at that DV you collect a few shards of that glass and they match it. And I had no idea, and I'm 8 years into a career, but that's not something, the crime scene stuff, obviously officers don't specialize in that, but that was something that was never taught to me. I know all evidence is, as I mentioned earlier in the program, is important. And I learned that as I went, that everything could be a hair, could be a cigarette butt that we know has solved a lot of cases with the DNA on that. It could be the shards of glass. It could be a paint chip that you just see laying there in the parking lot, the lonely paint chip. It could be anything. But if those crime scene techs, they can make or break a case, as can an officer. Those initial responding guys make or break a case, whether it's physical evidence or evidence they're collecting through an interview with somebody.
Yeah, and just some of the things like this guy that we hunted down, he made a statement to an officer in the back of a car, and that officer was smart enough, to write it down, and it came decades later. It came back to bite the suspect. So anything, and I didn't know always. That you should keep pretty much everything, even though our property management guys were and gals were, they don't, obviously their buildings bursting at the seams, but it's important to keep this as much as stuff and really look at what the scene tells you and kind of study it. And I think that's a good mark of a good CSI or a detective.
Yeah. You mentioned, going around to, I don't remember the phrase or how you worded it, but I know through my career, I went and made honest friendships with the crime scene techs, with the dispatch center, with the property and evidence folks, with even the facilities maintenance, the auto shop folks. I went and made honest friendships with them, and I'll tell you, that was worth $1 million in my career, because if I needed something, I could just pick up that phone and call that crime scene tech and say, "Hey, this is Rich. I'm looking to see if you can get me something more in this case," or, "Oh, absolutely, I'll take care of that for you." Instead of just saying, "Hey, this is officer, this is deputy so-and-so," and then giving them a case number and asking them to look into it. They know you one-on-one as an individual. And yeah, that was worth $1 million through my career.
Yeah, and we did that a lot with the lab. We would go over to the lab and just sit with them during what we call case evaluation meetings.
Teach me.
They would say, "Hey, did you think about X, Y, and Z? We have really good, we find DNA, on the fingernail scrapings. We do this," and we were like, "Oh, okay, that's I didn't think about that. That's great." So to me, it's that collaboration, and we're all in it as a team. And if we look at it as trying for the greater good to solve these cases, that's what we're there for.
Yep. It's like any career, if you immerse yourself into it, jump into it, and you just don't do the bare minimum, you're going to be successful and great things are going to come at the hands of things you touch. Great things are going to come. So you got to immerse yourself and be involved in it, be part of it, and learn as much as you can. Again, no matter the career, but for sure this career, because you can make a difference in a lot of people's lives as you have. So
Well, thank you.
anyway, Troy, we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank you so much for being on the program, and thank you for your dedication to the cold case portion of your career, because you definitely made a difference in a lot of people's lives for sure. And wish you the best of luck with the book, and maybe you'll get an author, one or two more out there before you wrap it up on that, and we'll get the opportunity to read those too. But I'm definitely going to pick up a book. I want to thank you. And definitely we'll be in touch with you off the air here in the weeks coming, and wish you the great holiday season for you and the family. So
You too, Rich. It was an honor to be on. I appreciate it. Thank
I want
you.
to thank you very much. We're just going to log it on out, and we can stay on and chat after that.